It was 3:42 a.m. when the first text appeared on my phone. The glow of the screen was the only light in the room, slicing through the darkness, a stark contrast to the deep silence of the night. I wasn't expecting a message, especially not at this hour. My mind was foggy from an evening of restless sleep, a restless mind, and the kind of exhaustion that can only come from years of living in a state of perpetual anticipation. That's the thing about a long relationship. Sometimes you don't realize the way it can slowly drain you until you're so far past your limit that the emptiness feels normal. The text wasn't from anyone I recognized at first. The name was unfamiliar, but as my blurry eyes adjusted, I could make out the message. It was short. It was simple. And yet, it was everything I didn't want to see. I think you should know, she's not where she said she'd be. I blinked. I thought I misread it. I rubbed my eyes. Maybe I was just seeing things in the dark. But no, there it was again, the stark simplicity of those words, hanging in the air. I didn't know what to do. Who was this person? And who were they talking about? The only person I could think of was Ella, my wife of 7 years. But that couldn't be right, could it? For a second, I thought about ignoring it. It was a wrong number. It was a mistake. But then, as quickly as the message had appeared, my phone buzzed again. This time, the message was from someone I did recognize. It was from my old friend, Jamie. Jamie and I hadn't talked in years, not since high school. We'd drifted apart, lost in the chaos of our own lives. So why now? Why was he reaching out? I opened his message, trying to shake the sudden knot in my stomach. I hate to be the one to say this, but you need to know. Ella isn't where she told you she was. My heart began to beat faster. I sat up in bed, staring at the phone screen. What the hell was going on? Jamie was an honest guy, or at least, he used to be. I couldn't think of a reason why he would send me a message like this, unless he had proof. Unless he knew something I didn't. I felt a pit open in my stomach, an emptiness that no text could ever fill. I had to know more. I had to understand what this meant. I typed back, my fingers trembling. What are you talking about? What's going on? The reply came almost instantly. She's with him, man. I didn't want to be the one to tell you, but I couldn't keep quiet anymore. I'm sorry. With those words, the world around me seemed to freeze. Everything became still. The room was suffocating. I felt the walls closing in on me. Ella, my wife, with him. My mind screamed at me to stop, to rationalize it away, but I couldn't. I knew in that instant that there was no way to deny it. My entire life, the one I thought I knew, was crumbling right before my eyes. I sat there for what felt like an eternity, my phone still glowing in my hand. The text kept replaying in my mind like a broken record. She's with him. I stood up, my legs shaky, the weight of the truth pressing down on me. The room seemed to spin, and I had to grab onto the nightstand just to steady myself. My thoughts were a blur. How could this be happening? Why would Ella do this? She had always been so careful, so meticulous, so perfect. But maybe that was it. Maybe I had never really known her. The phone buzzed again. Another message from Jamie. She's been gone for a while now. I didn't know how to say this, but I think it's over, man. I sank back down onto the bed, my hands shaking. I couldn't breathe. How was I supposed to process this? How was I supposed to understand why my wife, the woman I had built my life with, had turned into a stranger in the dead of night? I had so many questions, so many things I needed to ask. But the one thing I knew for sure was that this wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a misunderstanding. Ella had made her choice. I didn't know what to do with myself. The messages were still there, staring up at me from the screen, a reminder of everything I thought I knew and everything that was about to fall apart. I paced back and forth in the dim glow of the streetlight filtering in through the blinds, the sound of my footsteps the only thing breaking the heavy silence of the room. I thought about calling Ella, about demanding answers. But something stopped me. What if I was wrong? What if I was just overreacting? I had been down this road before, looking for clues that weren't there, reading too much into things that didn't add up. I couldn't go down that path again. And yet, the doubt was creeping in like a poison, slowly but surely, eating away at the foundation of everything we had built. I sat back down on the bed and stared at my phone. The messages were still there, the words hanging like a weight around my neck. It wasn't just what Jamie had said, it was the way he said it. He was being careful, too careful. His words felt like a warning, like he was trying to tell me something without actually saying it out loud. For the next few minutes, I just sat there, unsure of what to do next. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but the more I thought about it, the more the pieces began to fall into place. The late nights, the excuses, the way Ella had become more distant over the past few months. At first, I chalked it up to work stress, the pressure of balancing everything in our busy lives. But now, with this message, with Jamie's cryptic warning, I realized I had been blind. I checked the time, 4:05 a.m. My mind was racing, every thought tumbling over the next. Should I call her? Should I wait for her to come home? I needed answers, but the fear of what I might discover paralyzed me. What if this was the moment everything changed? What if she was really with someone else? The thought alone made my chest tighten, but I couldn't ignore it. I couldn't pretend like everything was fine anymore. I grabbed my phone again, my fingers trembling. I sent a message to Jamie, a simple one. "What are you not telling me?" The reply came almost immediately. "I didn't want to get involved, but I can't watch this happen to you. She's been seeing him for weeks, maybe longer. I didn't want to be the guy to tell you, but it's the truth, and you need to know." I felt a cold wave wash over me, my mind spinning as the gravity of Jamie's words sank in. Ella, my wife, had been seeing someone else, and not just some one-night mistake, but a full-blown affair that had been going on for weeks. The worst part? It wasn't even the shock of the betrayal. It wasn't the fact that she had lied to me. It was the realization that I had been so blinded by my own routine, by the quiet comfort of our life together, that I hadn't seen it coming. I wanted to throw my phone across the room, wanted to scream and demand answers, but instead, I just sat there, staring at the screen, numb. How long had this been going on? How much did I not know? What had I missed? As I sat there in the dark, the seconds stretching into what felt like hours, I began to replay every moment from the last few months, trying to find the hidden signs, the things I should have noticed but had pushed aside. I thought back to the nights she had come home late, to the times she seemed distracted, her mind elsewhere. She had always been a good liar, I'll give her that. She had always known how to keep up appearances, to play the part of the perfect wife, even when things weren't perfect at all. But now I was seeing it all with new eyes. I saw the tiny cracks in her story, the moments where the facade slipped, where her eyes didn't meet mine the way they used to, where her smile didn't reach her eyes. It was all so painfully clear now. My heart ached, but it wasn't just from the pain of betrayal. It was from the loss of trust, the death of everything we had built together. I couldn't even recognize the woman I had married anymore. She was a stranger to me, someone I didn't know at all. I was snapped out of my thoughts when my phone buzzed again. It was another message from Jamie. "I'm sorry, man. I really am. But I think you should go check her phone. You'll find what you're looking for." My stomach dropped. I didn't know how to respond. Checking her phone? Was I really going to go down that road? Was I ready to face the truth, whatever it might be? Part of me wanted to shut it all down, to forget about Jamie's messages, to pretend like none of this was happening. But the other part of me, the part that had been ignored for so long, was demanding answers. Without thinking, I stood up and grabbed my jacket from the chair. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew one thing. I couldn't sit here anymore. I needed to confront her. I needed to know if it was all true. The door slammed shut behind me as I stepped into the cold night air, my breath fogging in the chill. The world felt surreal, like everything was out of focus, like I was moving through a dream I couldn't wake up from. The streetlights flickered above me as I made my way toward the car, my mind spinning with thoughts I didn't want to confront. By the time I reached the car, my hands were shaking. The cold night air felt like ice against my skin, but it didn't compare to the chill creeping up my spine. My heart was pounding in my chest, and every inch of my body was telling me to turn around, to forget everything and just go home. But I couldn't. I was already too deep into this, too far gone to ignore the pull of the truth. I threw myself into the driver's seat, slamming the door behind me. The engine roared to life, but the noise felt muffled in my ears, drowned out by the thoughts swirling around my head. I tried to steady myself, to focus on the road ahead, but the only thing I could see was Ella's face, the woman I had once trusted with everything. And now, I wasn't sure who she was anymore. I had so many questions. Too many. But none of them seemed to matter. What mattered now was whether or not I would face the truth. It was that moment, that choice, that was going to change everything. I reached for my phone and, for the third time that night, opened Jamie's message. "Check her phone," it read. "You'll find what you're looking for." The words hung in the air as I gripped the steering wheel tighter, my knuckles turning white. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to tell myself that snooping through her things was a violation that I didn't need to see anymore. But there was a darker, deeper part of me, the part that had been pushed aside for so long, that needed to see it for myself. I drove in silence for a few more minutes before pulling up outside our apartment. The building loomed before me, as cold and indifferent as everything else in my life felt right now. I parked the car, took a deep breath, and climbed out. The parking lot was empty, save for a few scattered cars, their owners nowhere to be found. I walked toward the building slowly, my mind still spinning, my thoughts trapped in an endless loop of doubt and betrayal. I stood in front of the door to our apartment, hand hovering over the handle. The familiar feeling of uncertainty gnawed at me again, but I shook it off. This was it. I had to know. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The apartment was dark and quiet, but I could still smell Ella's perfume lingering in the air, a faint trace of lavender mixed with something that felt like home. I closed the door behind me and listened for any sound of movement, but there was nothing. It was like the house itself was holding its breath, waiting for me to make the next move. I walked into the living room, the silence pressing in around me. My phone buzzed again, and I checked it automatically. Another message from Jamie. She's probably asleep. But go to the drawer by the bed. Check her phone. It's all there. My stomach twisted. The drawer by the bed? That was where she kept her things, where she kept the little pieces of her life that I had never thought to question. But now, I realized, I had never really known her. All those years, all that trust, how much of it had been real? How much of it had been an illusion? I walked down the hallway, my footsteps sounding too loud in the stillness. The bedroom door was ajar, and I could see the outline of the bed in the dim light. Ella's side of the bed was perfectly arranged, as though she had never left, never been anywhere else. But I knew that wasn't the case. I could feel the weight of her absence, the cold space where she should have been. I took a deep breath and pushed the door open. I stepped inside and walked to the nightstand, where the drawer was. My heart was pounding so loudly I could barely hear anything else. I reached out and opened it, almost afraid of what I might find. And then, there it was. Her phone, sitting innocently on top of a pile of papers, like it was just another object. But I knew better. This phone held everything. Every message, every call, every secret she had been hiding from me. I picked it up carefully, my hands trembling as I unlocked it. My heart was in my throat, and I could barely breathe as I scrolled through her messages, one after the other. At first, it was the usual stuff, texts between her and her friends, reminders of things she had to do, nothing out of the ordinary. But then I saw it. A message from a number I didn't recognize. I clicked on it, and my blood ran cold as I read the words. I miss you. Can't wait to see you again tonight. I'll make sure he's asleep by the time you get here. The words hit me like a punch in the gut. My vision blurred as I reread the message, my stomach lurching with nausea. This wasn't just some random mistake. This was a pattern. This was her life. A life I had never known about. A life I had never been a part of. I slammed the phone down on the nightstand, my hands shaking uncontrollably. I felt like I was going to choke on the air around me. This wasn't supposed to be how it ended. I wasn't supposed to find out like this. But here I was, standing in the ruins of everything I thought I knew, unable to turn back. I had to confront her. I had to ask her. But as I stood there, staring at the phone, I realized something that chilled me to my core. Even if she was standing in front of me right now, I wasn't sure I wanted to hear her answers. My hands shook as I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at Ella's phone. The harsh glow of the screen seemed almost surreal, casting a cold light across the room. I could hear the faint ticking of the clock in the background, each second dragging like an eternity, stretching the silence until it became unbearable. My mind was racing, spinning with so many thoughts and questions, but none of them seemed to make sense anymore. The messages I had just read. I miss you. Can't wait to see you again tonight. I'll make sure he's asleep by the time you get here. Echoed in my head like a drumbeat, drowning out everything else. Who was this person? Who had she been seeing behind my back? And for how long? The nausea in my stomach grew stronger with every passing second. It was one thing to suspect something, to feel that nagging doubt in the back of your mind, but it was another thing entirely to have the proof, to see the words written out in black and white. Ella, my wife, the woman I thought I knew better than anyone, had been living a lie. It wasn't just a single mistake, a moment of weakness. This was a betrayal that ran deep, a betrayal that shattered everything I thought I understood about our relationship. I picked up the phone again, my fingers trembling as I scrolled through the messages. There were more. Messages that painted a picture I couldn't ignore, messages that revealed the full extent of her deceit. My eyes darted from one conversation to the next, each one worse than the last. She had been planning this for months, keeping secrets from me while I stayed blissfully unaware, thinking everything was fine. I wanted to throw the phone across the room, to smash it into pieces, to rid myself of the evidence, but I couldn't. I had to know the truth, all of it. I had to understand what had happened, what had gone wrong. I felt like I was suffocating under the weight of the realization, the cold, hard reality of what my life had become. I stood up abruptly, the room spinning as I made my way to the living room. My mind was a blur of conflicting emotions, anger, hurt, confusion. I didn't know what to do, what to say. The thought of confronting her, of facing her after everything I had just discovered, seemed impossible. But I couldn't just sit here and pretend like I hadn't seen the truth. I couldn't let her continue to lie to me. I paced back and forth, my footsteps echoing in the quiet apartment. My heart was racing. My mind was clouded with rage and disbelief. How could she do this to me? How could she betray me like this, after everything we had been through? Was it all a lie? Was everything we had built together just an illusion? I glanced at the clock. It was 5:30 a.m. I didn't know where she was, but I knew she wasn't here. I knew she had been out with him, whoever he was. The thought of her with someone else, touching someone else, made my stomach turn. I had always thought that we were different, that we were stronger than other couples, that we understood each other in a way no one else did. But now, it felt like all of that had been ripped away in a matter of seconds. I picked up my phone again, scrolling through the contacts until I found her name. My finger hovered over it for a moment, unsure if I was ready to call her, unsure if I even wanted to hear her voice after everything I had just discovered. But I had to. I had to know. I pressed the call button and waited. The phone rang once, twice, and then, on the third ring, she picked up. Hello. Her voice was soft, tired. I could hear the faint sound of rustling in the background, like she was moving around. It was the same voice I had heard 1,000 times before, but now it felt like a stranger's voice, distant and hollow. Where are you? I asked, my voice low and steady, though every inch of me wanted to scream. I wasn't sure if I was angry or just heartbroken, but I had to know what she would say. I'm on my way home, she replied. Her tone was cautious, hesitant. There was an edge of uncertainty in her voice, and I could tell she wasn't expecting this conversation. On your way home, I repeated, unable to keep the disbelief out of my voice. Is that where you were? With him? There was a long pause, a silence that stretched between us, thick and uncomfortable. I could hear her breathing on the other end of the line, the way her breaths were shallow, like she was trying to keep herself together. Please, can we talk about this later? She asked, her voice cracking slightly. I'm really tired, and I just need to get home. No, I said, my voice stronger now. We're going to talk about this right now. You don't get to keep running from this. I felt a surge of anger rise in me, a heat that burned in my chest. I wasn't sure if it was from the betrayal or from the way she had tried to avoid the confrontation, but it didn't matter. I needed the truth. I know everything, Ella. I continued, my words coming out more forcefully than I intended. I know about him. I know about the messages. I know what you've been doing behind my back. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. She didn't respond immediately, and for a moment, I thought she was going to hang up. But then, finally, she spoke. I never wanted you to find out this way, she said, her voice small and fragile, like she was trying to hold herself together. I didn't want to hurt you, but I'm sorry. I've been seeing someone else. I never meant for it to go this far, but it did, and I don't know how to fix it. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I had known, deep down, that it was coming, but hearing her say it out loud, hearing her admit it, was like tearing the last thread of hope from my chest. I closed my eyes for a moment, swallowing the lump in my throat. I couldn't speak. I didn't know what to say. Everything I thought I knew, everything I had trusted, had just come crashing down in front of me. I can't do this anymore, Ella. I whispered, my voice breaking for the first time. I don't know who you are anymore. The line went silent. The weight of those words hung in the air like a death sentence, and in that moment, I knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The silence on the other end of the phone felt deafening. I could hear Ella's shallow breathing, the way she was trying to find the right words, but nothing seemed to come. I wasn't sure if she was shocked by my reaction or if she just didn't know how to explain herself. But that was the problem, wasn't it? There was no explanation that could fix this, no words that could undo the damage. I could feel the numbness starting to settle in, creeping up my spine and making it harder to breathe. My hands were still shaking, and I found myself gripping the phone so tightly it hurt. How had we gotten here? How had everything turned into this mess? I had spent years of my life thinking that we had built something strong, something that couldn't be broken. But here I was, standing in the ruins of it all, unable to stop the destruction. I don't know how to fix this, Ella finally whispered. Her voice was small, fragile, and for a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. But then I remembered everything. The lies, the betrayal, the countless moments where she had chosen someone else over me. I swallowed hard, trying to push past the pain that was starting to flood through me. You don't get to fix this, I said, my voice coming out much colder than I intended. You had your chance. You made your choice. Her silence spoke louder than any words could have. I knew she didn't know what to say. How could she? How could she possibly make sense of the mess she had created? I don't know what happened, she said, almost pleading. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I didn't want to hurt you. You didn't mean for it to go this far? I repeated, my voice rising without me even realizing it. How could you say that? You chose this. You chose him. You knew exactly what you were doing every time you lied to me, every time you snuck around behind my back. There was a long pause on the other end. I could almost hear her trying to gather herself, but I wasn't sure if she was ready to admit what she had done. She had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. And no matter how much she apologized, no matter how many tears she shed, it didn't change the fact that she had broken something between us that could never be fixed. I'm sorry, she said again, her voice cracking. I don't know what else to say. I messed up, okay? I messed up, and I don't know how to make it right. I just need you to understand that this wasn't about you. It wasn't about us. It was about me. I've been lost for so long, and I made a mistake. Her words hit me like a freight train. The anger, the betrayal, it all seemed to surge back at once, crashing over me in waves. You've been lost, I said, my voice trembling now. What does that even mean, Ella? You were lost. So you just went out and found someone else to fill the void? Is that what you're telling me? That this is all my fault because you were somehow broken? No, this is on you. You made this choice, not me. I could hear her crying now, her sobs echoing through the phone. I never wanted to hurt you, I swear. I never thought it would end up like this. But the truth was, it had ended up like this. It had ended up with us on the verge of falling apart, with nothing left but shattered trust and broken promises. There was no undoing it. Not now. I don't know if I can forgive you, I whispered, the words tasting bitter on my tongue. I don't know if I even want to. You've taken everything from me, Ella, and now, all I have left is the mess you left behind. I dropped my head into my hands, letting out a shaky breath. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I couldn't breathe. The weight of what she had done, the weight of everything that had happened over the past few days, was suffocating me. I had thought I knew who she was. I had thought that we had something unbreakable. But now, it felt like I had never known her at all. There was a quiet moment on the other end of the phone, and for a fleeting second, I thought she might say something that could fix this. But nothing came, just more silence. Finally, I spoke again, my voice barely above a whisper. I don't know where we go from here, Ella. I don't know if I even want to know. I'll do anything, she said, her voice desperate now. Anything to make it right. Just don't leave me. Please. The desperation in her voice made my heart ache, but it didn't change the fact that everything had already been broken beyond repair. I wasn't sure if I could stay in this relationship any longer, not after everything she had done. Not after the lies, the secrecy, the betrayal. I don't think I can be with you anymore, I said, the words tasting like acid in my mouth. I can't do this. Not after everything. I don't know who you are anymore. And I don't know if I can ever trust you again. I heard her sobbing, but I couldn't bring myself to comfort her. I couldn't pretend like everything was okay anymore. The person I had been married to was gone, and I wasn't sure if I could ever get them back. The line went quiet, and I felt a heaviness settle over me. I didn't want to make this decision. I didn't want to feel this way, but I knew deep down that there was no other choice. I hung up the phone and stared at the screen for a long time, the weight of everything crashing down on me. I didn't know what would happen next. I didn't know how I was supposed to move forward. All I knew was that I couldn't stay in this toxic, broken relationship any longer. Something inside of me had snapped, and there was no going back. And in that moment, I realized that this was the end. The end of a chapter one thought I would never have to close. The end of everything I thought was real. The apartment felt smaller than usual as I dropped the phone onto the coffee table. It was like a weight had settled in my chest, and with it, a sense of finality that I couldn't escape. The conversations with Ella, the words exchanged, were still echoing in my mind, a broken record of everything I'd tried to ignore for far too long. I stared at the empty space where she should have been, feeling the void between us stretch further than I ever thought possible. It had all come crashing down, a life I had carefully built, with the woman I thought I knew, shattered in a single phone call. I stood up, pacing the room, unsure of what to do with my hands or my thoughts. The silence was suffocating. The apartment that used to feel like home now felt like a prison, the walls closing in on me with each passing second. I could still feel the weight of her absence, and yet, I also felt the distance that had grown between us, the distance that had begun long before I found out about the affair. Everything had changed. Every memory, every smile, every word I thought was genuine, now felt tainted. The small, seemingly insignificant moments we had shared suddenly held a new meaning. I kept replaying them in my head. The nights when she'd seemed distant, the times when I'd asked her if something was wrong, only to be met with a hollow smile and a vague answer. But now, with the truth laid bare, I couldn't ignore it. I couldn't pretend anymore. The anger had begun to simmer beneath the surface, but I held it back. There was no point in lashing out, no point in destroying things further. I knew that if I did, if I let the rage take over, I'd only be feeding into something that had already broken beyond repair. But the pain was there, raw and unrelenting, and it burned with a ferocity I hadn't expected. I wasn't just angry at her. I was angry at myself. Angry for not seeing it sooner, for ignoring the signs, for believing in something that wasn't real. I grabbed my coat and stepped outside, not knowing where I was going, but needing to get out of the apartment. The cold air hit me like a slap to the face, and for a moment, it was the only thing that grounded me. I walked aimlessly, my mind still reeling from the conversation, the betrayal, the loss. It wasn't just the affair itself, it was the realization that the person I had trusted, the person I had shared my life with, was someone I didn't recognize anymore. I thought about all the things I had sacrificed, the time I had spent building a future together, only for it to collapse in an instant. I thought about how I had always put her needs first, always tried to be understanding, patient, and loving, only to be met with deceit. I had been a fool, and it hurt more than I cared to admit. I stopped walking in front of a small cafe, its windows lit warmly against the cold night. It was a place we had visited often, a place where we'd laughed over coffee and shared our thoughts about the future. But now, it felt like a reminder of everything I had lost. I looked at my reflection in the glass, unsure of the man staring back at me. Who was he? Who had I become? I sat down on the curb, my elbows on my knees, my head in my hands. I wasn't sure what I was supposed to feel, relief, sadness, anger, or a strange combination of all three. All I knew was that I couldn't go back to the way things were. Not now. Not after everything that had been exposed. The message from Jamie still lingered in my mind. I didn't want to be the one to tell you, but you need to know. At first, I had resented him for getting involved, for making it his business. But now, in hindsight, I understood why he had reached out. He had seen something in Ella that I hadn't. He had seen the cracks, the lies, long before I had. Maybe he hadn't wanted to be the bearer of bad news, but he had given me the information I needed to face the truth, no matter how painful it was. My phone buzzed again, pulling me out of my thoughts. It was a text from Ella. I know you're hurt. I know I've done something unforgivable, but please, can we just talk? I don't want to lose you. I'll do anything. I stared at the message for a long time. It wasn't the first time she had apologized, and it wouldn't be the last. But the words felt hollow now, empty promises I couldn't trust anymore. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that everything could somehow go back to how it was before. but I knew deep down that it never would. I typed out a response, but then hesitated. What was the point? What could I say that would make a difference? There was nothing left to fix, no more promises to be made. I had reached the end of the road with her, and no amount of talking could change the reality that I was living in now. I erased the message and tossed my phone into my jacket pocket, feeling a strange sense of finality in the action. I stood up slowly and took a deep breath. The world around me felt cold, detached, and yet I knew I had to move forward. I couldn't stay stuck in this moment of pain and confusion. I had to let go, even if it felt like a part of me was being ripped away with each step I took. I walked back toward the apartment, not knowing what would happen next, but certain of one thing. This was the beginning of something new, something different. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew I couldn't keep living in the shadow of a broken past. As I approached the door to the apartment, I felt a strange sense of clarity. I had faced the truth. I had confronted the lies. Now, it was time to move on, even if it was the hardest thing I had ever done. I stood there, my hand on the doorknob, feeling the weight of everything crashing down around me. The apartment felt emptier than it had ever been before. The familiar smells, the sounds of the city outside, the comfortable routine of our lives, all of it felt distant now, like it belonged to someone else, some other time. Ella had been my constant, my partner in everything. But now, everything had changed, and I was left to pick up the pieces of a life I barely recognized. I turned the key and stepped inside. The silence hit me like a physical force, the kind of silence that felt suffocating, as if the walls were closing in. I hadn't heard from Ella in hours after our last phone call, and something about that felt final. I half expected her to be waiting for me, sitting on the couch with a tear-streaked face, ready to beg for my forgiveness. But the apartment was empty. I walked further into the living room, the floor creaking under my feet. The couch where we used to sit together, talking about our day or making plans for the future, sat there, untouched, cold, abandoned. I could almost hear her laughter echoing in my mind, but it was like it belonged to a different life, a different version of us that no longer existed. I looked over at the small bookshelf in the corner, the one where we'd kept the little trinkets from our travels, photos, souvenirs, things that had meant something to both of us. But now, they all felt like reminders of a lie. Every picture, every memento, seemed to mock me. How had I not seen it? How had I been so blind to the cracks that had been there all along? How had I not noticed that Ella had stopped being the person I knew and had turned into someone else? I sat down on the couch, my hands pressed into the cushions as I tried to collect myself. There was no use in pretending anymore. She had betrayed me in the worst way possible, and no amount of apologies, no amount of regret, would undo the damage. The trust between us was gone, shattered beyond repair. I couldn't go back to the way things were, even if I wanted to. I ran my fingers through my hair, a sense of dread settling in my stomach. I had spent so much of my life loving her, trusting her, and now, in a matter of hours, everything had unraveled. I didn't know who she was anymore. I didn't know if I could ever trust her again, and even if I could, I wasn't sure I wanted to. The phone buzzed again in my pocket. I didn't even have to look to know it was Ella. I had stopped checking the messages, but I felt the pull, the temptation to read her words and hear what she had to say. Part of me wanted to pick up the phone, to hear her beg for my forgiveness, to hear her explain everything. But another part of me just wanted to leave it all behind. I had to face the reality that there was no going back. But then, the message popped up on the screen. I looked at it, unsure of what to do, but I opened it anyway. Please, I can't lose you. I'll do whatever it takes to fix this. I never wanted it to be like this. I know I've hurt you, but I can't lose you. Not like this. I stared at her words, my fingers trembling as I read them. She was sorry. She was so sorry, but it wasn't enough. It could never be enough. She had crossed a line, and that line could never be uncrossed. I set the phone down on the coffee table, feeling a sense of coldness wash over me. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but I knew deep down that no answer would satisfy me. She could apologize a million times, but it wouldn't erase what had happened. It wouldn't undo the months of lies, of sneaking around behind my back. What did I really want from her? What did I even want from myself? Was there any part of me that could forgive her? Or had everything inside me already snapped, like a thread pulled too tight, breaking under the pressure? I stood up and walked over to the small window that overlooked the city. The night was quiet, the streets dimly lit by the streetlights. The world outside seemed so far away, so separate from the storm that was raging inside me. How could everything change so quickly? How could everything I thought I knew be ripped away in the span of a few hours? I thought about the years we had spent together, the moments that felt like they meant something, the future we had planned. I had imagined a life with Ella. I had imagined growing old with her, building something solid and lasting. But now, it felt like a distant dream, something that had never been real. The reality was that the woman I had loved had been hiding something from me, something that had changed everything. The question now was, what was I supposed to do with all of this? Was it over? Was there any way to move forward? Could I ever rebuild the trust that had been shattered, or was I destined to live in the ruins of this relationship for the rest of my life? As I stood there, staring out at the city, I felt a sense of calm start to settle in. It wasn't a feeling of peace, but more of acceptance. This was my reality now. There was no undoing what had happened, no going back to the way things were. The only thing I could do was move forward, even if I didn't know where that would lead. I turned away from the window and picked up my phone again, typing a message to Ella. My fingers hesitated for a moment, but then I began to type. I need space. I need to think. I don't know what's next, but I can't keep doing this right now. I can't keep pretending everything is fine. I hit send, knowing that it was the right thing to do, but also knowing that it would hurt her more than anything. I didn't know if we could ever find our way back to each other, but I knew that for now, I couldn't keep living in the shadow of the lies. I sat down on the couch again, the weight of everything pressing down on me. There was no escaping it. This was the end of something, and the beginning of something else. What that something would be, I had no idea, but I knew it was time to move on. Time to face the future, no matter how uncertain it was. The next few days were a blur. My world felt like it had shifted on its axis, and every step I took seemed uncertain. Ella's absence was felt in every corner of the apartment, but so was the weight of the decision I had made. I had chosen to face the truth, no matter how painful it was, and now, for the first time in a long time, I could finally breathe. It wasn't easy, not by any means, but there was a strange sort of peace that came with knowing I had made the right choice. Ella had tried to reach out, of course. Her messages, her calls, they came one after another, each one more desperate than the last. But I had made my decision, and I wasn't sure if I was ready to hear her voice again. Not yet, not until I had figured out what I truly wanted. I wasn't angry anymore. I was just tired. Tired of the lies, tired of the broken promises, and most of all, tired of being in a relationship that had become something unrecognizable. I spent time with friends I hadn't seen in years, people who reminded me that there was more to life than the small, confined world I had built with Ella. I rediscovered parts of myself that had been buried under years of routine. I read books, took long walks through the city, and spent hours simply thinking about what I wanted from my life moving forward. The past was behind me, and I was slowly beginning to understand that the future didn't have to be defined by the mistakes of those who came before. Then, one evening, as I was sitting in my favorite cafe, my phone buzzed with a message. It was from Jamie, the friend who had been the first to give me the uncomfortable truth. I'm really proud of you, man. It's not easy, but you're doing the right thing. Just remember, you're not alone in this. I smiled at the message, knowing that Jamie, despite everything, had been a quiet pillar of support in this storm. He had given me the courage to confront the reality that had been staring me in the face, even when I didn't want to see it. I spent the next few weeks working on myself, healing the wounds that had been left behind. I went to therapy, not because I was broken, but because I wanted to understand myself better, to learn how to trust again, not just others, but also myself. I started focusing on my career, something that had taken a back seat during the tumult of my relationship. Slowly, but surely, I began to rebuild. One evening, just as the sun was setting, I walked down the street and realized that I was finally free. Free from the weight of the past, free from the fear that had haunted me for so long. I had faced the hardest truth I had ever known, and though it had shattered me, it had also made me stronger. Ella reached out one last time, and this time, I was ready. I didn't know what the future would hold for either of us, but I knew I was no longer willing to live in the shadows of a relationship that had never been fully honest. I responded, but it wasn't with anger or resentment. I've learned a lot these past few weeks. I appreciate the time we had, but I need to move forward. I hope you find your own peace, too. That was it. It was as final as it could be, but there was no bitterness in it, no regret. It was simply the closing of one chapter and the opening of another. A few months later, I found myself at a crossroads in life, standing on the edge of something new. I wasn't looking for love, not yet, anyway. I had learned to be content with myself, to be okay with my own company. But what I had discovered in this time of self-reflection was that there was hope after heartbreak. There was growth after pain. There was light after darkness. And in that moment, standing on the edge of something new, I realized that while the past had shaped me, it no longer defined me. The future was mine to create, and I was ready for whatever came next. Life was messy, unpredictable, and often painful, but it was also full of opportunities, growth, and the chance to start fresh. And for the first time in a long time, I felt excited about the future. I knew that no matter what came my way, I would be okay, because I had learned the most important lesson of all, that I was enough, just as I was. And that was all I needed to begin again.